and that is how can we serve our citizens better? And this became so important during the last year of the pandemic. We suddenly came to realize how public services and digital public service have become an essential service. So to address this issue, and I see continuously participants coming in, so I welcome everyone. To address this issue today, we have brought together a unique panel of experts, actually the coordinators of 5 European projects, major research projects in the area of digital service and service co-creation. And we bring them together with high-level decision makers in the second half of the session. So we have a first half of the session, and I will now show the agenda. The first half of the session is designed to illustrate the results of the 5 European research projects. Let me share my agenda with you. So today we have 4 experts. Unfortunately, Leire Owe Echevarria had to drop out at the last moment. I will give a brief introduction. Then we have the 4 coordinators of the projects presenting the key insight gained from the project. We will then open up the discussion for question and answer. And already now you can start putting your question using the chat feature. We will take up your questions at the end of the session. It's a pretty packed agenda, and this is the reason for this is that at 4 we have the high-level session with some unique decision makers from the private and the public sector, from the European Commission, from IDEO, and from the Greek government, coming to share their wisdom and their experience with us. And the idea of today is a little bit, if you want, the metaphor of today is to pass the baton. We start off with the researcher bringing their insight, and they pass the results to the decision makers that have to turn this into action and into results visible to all European citizens, because this is the challenge we are facing today. It's not just delivering research, it's not just delivering projects, it's delivering results which are visible, and not just for a few leaders, you know, the countries that we know or the cities that are at the leading edge, but for all cities, for all countries, for all regions. And that is the challenge we are having here today. So without further ado, and reminding you that all of you are muted at the moment, you can intervene anytime you want during the session through the chat. We will take into account your comments and come back to you at the end of the session. So this event that we are sharing today, that we are starting today, comes at the end of a very large-scale research effort as part of the Co-VAL project. And we have, in the Co-VAL project, started more than 3 years ago. We have interacted with some unique experts, from Simsik to Mike Bracken to Diego Piacentini. We have held many events online and offline with stakeholders, facilitated peer-to-peer interaction, sharing of expertise. We've also done a lot of analysis of research that is summarized in some of the papers that you see here. Just yesterday, we published the State of Co-Creation, which shows, based on results of an interactive dashboard, shows the progress of each European country and 6 cities into adopting co-creation, both at the level of policy and practice. And here you see one of the dashboards that we have used. This is a major effort, and today is somehow the final public facing event that we organize. But it's more than that, actually. This is also brings together the results from 5 projects, the 5 projects that address the topic of co-creation. supported by the European Commission in the last 5 years. And these are major projects involving 50 partners and producing a wealth of results, reports, policy papers, scientific articles, 3 dashboards, 5 games, 4 case repository of cases, more than 150 case studies, a wealth of output. And the idea of today is to bring it together. And here, this is the policy brief that we present today, somehow aims to summarize all this insight in a digestible format. And you will have received the policy brief. It's also available on the Lisbon Council website and on the Co-VAL website. It's a joint policy brief of all the 5 projects, and it summarizes the result, but it's also a way to access the results. So this is why the arrow goes both ways. First, we summarize into the policy, but from the policy brief, you can have direct access to the dashboard, to the games, to the results of the project, which obviously are impossible to summarize in 24 pages. This is the context where we are, and I'm going to address now a little bit, I'm going to go back to the main question, and that is, how can we improve public services and serve our citizens better? And of course, our answer, many of us are passionate about this, is co-creation, that is working better and more with users. But we are, as much as we are enthusiastic about it, as we are also aware of the limitation, we're also aware that it remains an edge and the pioneering activities, and it's not mainstreams as it should be. And in order to achieve the promised results, it needs to be far more widely adopted. So the policy brief aims to favor this transition, if you want, into maturity of co-creation. And that's why it deals with diverse issues such as what is co-creation, why it's important, what are the main policy actions that need to be carried out if we want to develop this at scale, what are the key lessons learned from all this experience for those organizations who want to address it, who want to adopt it. What can we learn from these 150 cases? In particular, how can we use co-creation to accelerate progress toward the achievement of the EU Green Deal results, the objectives, the net zero, the transition to net zero, which of course requires the collaboration of everyone. How can co-creation help? But it's not just about implementation. We also have to look ahead. It's not that we know everything. There are so many research questions that we still have to address, and this is another important point that the policy brief addresses. Now, I will start this overview of the final results, and with the question, what is co-creation? And obviously, we don't want to get into this. Could be, just the object of a session just dedicated to this, but it would be quite a boring session. What we want to say, and the important thing that we want to share with you, is co-creation is much more than asking users, what do you need? It is a set of structured methods that concern different level of engagement of users. We, in the Co-VAL project, refer to co-construction, co-design, and co-production. I think we are all familiar with co-design when users are involved, for instance, through a focus group, and they interact with prototypes and they give their feedback and they take part into the design. Co-production is the highest level of delivery, where users are involved to take part and actually deliver the results, either through developing apps based on open data, if you're a technology person, or by volunteering, or even companies are involved by, for instance, adopting some code of practice or some standards that is required. The third level, which is a bit less known, but is very important, is co-construction. It's the most basic level, is where there is no active involvement of users. Is the co-creation that happens without the direct engagement and proactive engagement of users. That's why you see the arrow on the left side. And that can happen by looking at how users interact with a website, or looking at how they interact with the signs in an office, in a public office. We are all familiar with this feeling of being lost when entering a public administration building, trying to find the office to go to, and trying to fulfill and to follow the guidelines to fill a form. So observing users either live in person or what is much more frequent now, how they interact electronically, and for instance, the clicks and the logs. And one very important feature is the completion rates. We are all familiar with the difficulty in traction and adoption of digital government. Many of us drop out of trying to fill a form online. This is a very important source of data and one which is not sufficiently used and looked at. And what is important is that these three types of engagement are progressive. One builds on the other, and it's very difficult to have co-design if you don't actually study before what the users do and how they're interacting. They're also iterative. It's not that once you have arrived to co-production, then it's done. You have to restart. You have to look at how users interact. You have continuously monitoring and restart the cycle. And they have different scope. I mean, we all know that co-production and co-creation is costly, and the more engagement you request from users, the higher the cost. So there is a case for a much wider adoption of co-construction of solution where there is no engagement, direct engagement of users. It's much easier to start the co-creation process. Other important aspects that are worth taking into account is that co-creation is not just, does not concern only citizens. When we talk about co-creation, we talk about involving all the users that are needed in the achievement of a policy goal or in the delivery of a public services. And that can involve private business who have a part in the service delivery, such as banks, for instance, or that have a part into the achievement of the goals, say the famous General Data Protection Regulation. How do business react to this? How do they embody the regulation into their practice? But also other public administration. I think we are all familiar with general plans that then are not implemented because, say, local administration are not on board, or other departments of an administration are not. So there is a need to bring together all these players. But also, co-creation needs to be made more user-centric. We don't have, when we do co-creation, we have to do it with users in mind. And that is the first and foremost point of the policy recommendation that we present. The key point is not co-creation. Co-creation is not the goal. Co-creation is a mean. The goal is serving users, and co-creation is a tool to serve the users. And one of the problems we have is that too often we consider co-creation as the goal. We need to use co-creation, and if we want to use co-creation better and properly, the goal should be to serve the users. Now, the issue is, how do we make this Copernican change into public administration? There's nothing new, we have talked about user centricity for many years. But how can we achieve this at scale for all, not just for, say, Estonia, but for all public administration? And that is why we designed a set of policy recommendations that are structured in two areas. Strengthening capacity. That means for those who are interested to adopt co-creation, how can they do that? And that is providing the skills, recruitment pattern, not only directly, but also through support services, centralized support services to implement co-creation. This is one area of the policy recommendation that we address. And the other area is, how do we convince those public administrations that are not interested? How do we involve, how do we reach out to those who are not interested? How do we provide the right incentives, the right system of incentives? And that is what the right side, that is what the right side of the slide, and you will see in the policy brief, shows. One of the incentives is, and one of those that I'm more keen on, is open adoption metrics. If you want to focus on users, you have to give prominence to how users adopt your services. If the data on user adoption, which are, by the way, in many public administration, are not good data in terms of adoption of digital service, notably, if you make this data much more visible and public and standardized and comparable, not focusing on the projects the cost, the delivery, but actually the effect on users, to what extent users are actually adopting these services. This would become a powerful incentive for public administration to focus on the user, because if users are not taking part, are not benefiting from it, this will become immediately visible. And we've started to do this. You will see in the report through the website we created, Meta-Monitor, which gathers the data from the public administration on adoption. We also add 3 more recommendations. Long-term planning, that is, co-creation needs trust, trust needs delivery, and long-term planning. Changing plans and introducing one-off co-creation efforts is counterproductive. Conditional funding, there is a case for making public funding for public service innovation conditional on the adoption of co-creation method. User research should be a key feature in any public administration reform effort. And finally, support for experiments. We are not there yet. We are still a lot to learn, and we need to continue experimenting, and public policy should support this experimentation. Now, time is short. I don't want to go too much into that. And, so far I focus on the big picture, trying to give you an overview of what we found and how can we scale this up for all public administration in Europe. And this is important. But a lot of our project we're learning from those who have actually already done it. So in case you are a public administration or an organization that wants to adopt co-creation method, what are the key lessons learned? And this is not only one dedicated chapter of the policy brief, but one area where the TROPICO project has done a lot of work, and I would like to involve Lisa into this discussion. If Krisa, you can give the floor to Lisa. I think you're still muted, but you will be hearable in a moment. So Lisa, what can you tell us?
Sorry, and thank you so much for giving me the floor and for inviting me to this event. So I'll start by sharing my screen. So here we go. I'll just jump quickly to this one. So as David mentioned, we have not only in the TROPICO project, but also I think in all of the projects who are collaborating on this policy brief and in this event, we have sort of all together collected some research which tells us something about the success factors for collaboration and co-creation. And as David has already touched upon, so co-creation and collaboration, this is a very big promise to everyone. It promises to improve quality. It promises to improve efficiency and effectiveness, both in policy design and service delivery, which we have, to different degrees, we've focused both on policy design and service delivery. And we try to identify some clusters of such success factors for how to achieve this kind of collaboration and co-creation. Focusing on accountability, organizational design, management, and process. Now, these clusters of success factors can also, as pointed out earlier, can be both sort of possibilities for improvement, but also there are some pitfalls here. And I mean, drivers and barriers, these success factors can also go the other way and be sort of point to where one also might not succeed. So I'll move on to going into the different dimensions or different clusters of success factors. And one of the things that we see in our research is that organizational design is important. So, and in this sense, thinking about how the type of collaboration, the composition of the collaboration, or the team of organizations and participating partners in collaboration and co-creation is important. the size of the collaboration and the size of the co-creation structure is important. So by including a variety of expertise, knowledge, and resources, one is mostly beneficial for such co-creative processes. But you also then need to acknowledge and exploit these, be able to acknowledge and exploit differences, because when you have many actors, many partners in a collaboration or a co-creation process, there are bound to be different interests, different goals, differences in capacity, differences in culture, how you usually do things, different contexts. If you collaborate across countries, there will be, for example, different regulatory regimes, which you need to also take into account when you enter into such processes. One should always, well, it's beneficial, let's say that, to ensure formal authority of core organizations, especially if it's a government-initiated co-creative process. Then at least our research points to the fact that formal authority of this driving organization is important. There is also need for tailoring governance structures, using formal agreements to ensure the rules of the game and the collaboration, and when people or when actors act together. This creates some kind of predictability or a rules of the game for the process. At the same time, one needs to allow for creative processes and improvisation. So too much formalization might also hinder creative processes. Size matters in the way that smaller government-led collaborations could, so here it's beneficial to have a lead organization. So vertical governance or hierarchical governance, if you will, is beneficial. But in larger collaborations, for example, those kind of co-creative processes where a lot of big societal and dispersed actors are involved, then a more horizontal type of governance is more beneficial. The participatory process is important, as David already pointed out, and some of the recommendations coming out of some of our studies point to the importance of having a high interconnectedness between actors through frequent interaction, maybe in smaller groups, but also a clear mandate and autonomy of the actors within the collaboration. As David already touched upon, so ensuring higher levels or targeting higher levels of participation or in these creative or co-creation processes also creates more trust and is beneficial often for the collaboration. User research, engaging users in constructive and structured dialogue is beneficial, as well as also piloting ideas during the process. So also testing out the end results of the collaboration. So say it's developing a new app or a new digital tool, piloting this and testing it out together with users is always a good idea. Ensuring feedback mechanisms also from users is sometimes something that is not that is neglected, let's say that, in many cases, but trying to also include this is also something that is very useful for those who are working to develop new services or new products. The other two clusters of success factors concern leadership and management. and accountability and trust. So here, concerning leadership and management, of course, one could go very much into details on this, but one lesson that is very clear is that combining different management strategies is a good idea. Using transformational leadership, where one has more positive motivation and inspiration from leaders, focusing on both outcomes and learning from the process, is often very useful. Of course, this is always a difficult thing to ensure, but ensuring the necessary time and resources, allowing for this kind of experimentation and trial and error way of working is challenging, but also when you have it, ideally, then things work out better. Accountability and trust concerns, so in these kind of collaborations with a lot of different actors, different organizations, different with different interests, accountability relations, so the traditional accountability relations, which is more upwards from citizens to government in a way, might become blurred, and so trying to ensure a more multidimensional accountability structure is helpful, because it also creates trust between the creators and the users, let's say that, or the co-creators. So trust is also something that we found very much in our case studies to be very important. Now, trust is created also through good communication, frequent encounters, and not only via digital tools, and sort of course, digital tools facilitate this very much, but also informal meetings or face-to-face engagement is also important, in addition, to be able to sort of really be co-creative. So digital tools are important, but maybe are more useful, and especially useful in those situations where communication and interaction and trust already exists. So needs to be a balance between these face-to-face interaction, informal interaction, and formalization of interaction. So all in all, I mean, these are sort of clusters of success factors. And of course, there is no silver bullet, there is no magic potion, no one size fits all. But looking towards some of these success factors is what we think might be helpful, at least. So.
Thank you very much, Lisa. This is great, and I appreciate so much your effort. First, to summarize all the results in the policy brief, and now to summarize it in 5 minutes. This is a challenge for everyone, and we are running a bit late, so please stick to your time. Erika, I mean, we have heard and we have talked very abstractly about all basically the public service and public policy, but there's one area which is particularly suitable, and that is certainly the fight against climate change, the achievement and the transition to net zero, and in general, the achievement of the EU Green Deal. It is clear that co-creation plays a key role. How can government take advantage of co-creation? You looked at local communities, I understand, in particular. What did you learn?
Thank you, David. I am very glad to share the findings of the Enlarge project with you all. Just to remember that this project is dedicated to the memory of Professor Luigi Bobbio, that devoted his life to produce usable knowledge, to achieve better policies, and sadly passed away during our project. The Enlarge project focused on the role of collaborative processes for more effective, sustainable energy policies. The project analyzed 31 real policies and projects in about 12 European countries. It analyzed them through case studies, describing the goals, the tools, the mechanisms, and the results of collaborative actions within sustainable energy policies. As you all probably know or even suspect, in the environmental policy domain, and to be honest, in most of the other policies, the degree of achievement of policy outcomes not outputs, the outcomes, depends on the collaboration of citizens. A few examples. If people turn off the electricity during the peak hours, or if they accept to install more efficient windows, or more generally, if they participate to new sustainable city plans. In this sense, we are speaking of co-creation. The sustainable energy outcomes do not depend only from the government, from what the government does, from the input of the government, but also from the contribution of people, of citizens, people in a larger sense, also firms and representative stakeholders and so on. Collaborative processes aim to help and channel this contribution. This is the purpose. This is the contribution. But what makes a collaborative process successful, or at least relevant? This was the main question of the Enlarge project. We identified 3 areas to focus on that represent also a way, criteria to evaluate the collaboration processes within the policy domain. The first area is the effectiveness of participation, of collaboration. Collaborative processes should contribute to some kind of change in the way environmental policies are designed or implemented. In other words, only formal participation doesn't help or even hurt. On the contrary, substantial participation could enhance the sense of belonging and mutual responsibility of citizens, of people in general. Second, there is the problem of institutional sustainability. Participation should integrate, should add to the traditional democratic process, helping it grow, without generating too much resistance or disruptive conflicts. This basically means that public officials and citizens should share a common language, understand each other, and mutually learn from their different perspectives and goals. The third point, the third area of evaluation is social legitimacy. Rigid delivery procedures, no flexibility, poor design, weak communication, lack of feedbacks raise the risk of disengagement and distrust. Sense of belonging, mutual responsibility and learning, trust, as also Liz already recalled, are among the mechanisms able to explain the success of the experiences we analyzed. We also identified a range of policy tools put in place in different contexts to trigger those mechanisms, mutual learning and trust and so on. Some examples are co-design committees involving groups of citizens, temporary associations, intersectoral working groups, commission, formal representative of the citizens' views, deliberative tools, grants, bonuses, participatory evaluation groups, and others. And of course, the professional expertise to manage them. Moreover, co-creation is to be purposively designed according to the characteristics of the context. This latter point is key, the point of context. It implies that, unfortunately, as already Lise said, one-size-fits-all solutions do not exist. Environmental policies and their participatory components should take into account the characteristics of the context. For example, is the policy audience narrow or broad? How many are the innovators among them? There is conflict or indifference towards the topic under discussion, or there is collaboration, hopefully. Enlarge has demonstrated that for collaboration to achieve environmentally relevant results, it has to be taken seriously, properly designed and managed. The good news, there is a good news, that is, if there is not a general solution, there are many tools to be considered as a set of options to design a process that works. The Enlarge project collected several exemplar strategies used in different policy contexts. It also produced a game book that is here represented, is also online available in several languages, English and other. This game book summarizes the findings of the case studies. This game book tells the story of a mayor that wants to implement a new wind energy plant into the territory of her small municipality. How and when to involve the citizens into the process, what citizens and the representative to involve. The story develops into a series of options, sometimes unexpected problems, and some possible solutions, all of them presenting opportunities and also other further problems, as the real policies are. So thank you very much for the attention.
That's great, Erika, and obviously a link to the game book is in the policy brief. Now, let's turn to Anna. The Co-VAL project has done a lot of research on what's actually happening on the ground, tracking how public administration are doing co-creation and how many of them are doing co-creation. What can you tell us? What are the key insights that you found?
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Just a second. Make sure. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. It is a pleasure to be here with you and actually present the Co-VAL results. Just a second to put it on, maybe a bit later. So yes, the Co-VAL was actually another project in the same domain that actually I tried to answer the research question, how actually to explore and analyze the public administration to become more open and more collaborative. Encouraging the engagement and participation of public, private, and civil society stakeholders for more effective and user-friendly public service design, delivery, and policy making. So the idea, the main contributions of Co-VAL were mainly related to the measurement, as you said, David, and the policy impact of co-creation. So on top of just providing the theoretical framework of value co-creation in public services that actually examines three main aspects: its nature and characteristics, its organizational and implementation modes, and its impacts. On top of that, we have actually performed a thorough analysis of more than 90 case studies, and we have performed more than 150 interviews in order to analyze how service design, living labs, digital public management, and public sector innovation networks are actually used for services co-innovation and co-creation. At the same time, we ran a systematic survey of co-creation, adoption, and service innovation in public sector, involving more than 1,000 public sector managers and NGOs from 6 European countries, while we initiated the monitoring of a series of KPIs, indicators on digital transformation and co-creation adoption at the member states. That could be also visualized as a dedicated dashboard. And of course, the main concern was actually to transform all these results, research results, into actionable recommendations, aiming to make co-creation the norm for delivering better public services. So the key findings there, mainly as derived, and this is what I want to say, from the initial analysis of the survey that we have performed, what we have tried is to analyze what does this interest at the policy level means in practice. So how common is co-creation among public bodies? How is it actually done, and does it deliver at the end the promised benefits? So among the key findings, I could say that, of course, it shows that governments are more and more aware of co-creation as a policy area in which they should be active and where they might be drawing more benefits. So more than 80% of public administrations in Europe say that they have an important viable co-creation project underway. However, there is a lot of confusion, and this is what has been derived from the analysis, over what co-creation actually is, where it has been adopted. Most governments typically employ, let's say, very traditional methods, such as interviews with citizens, a short analysis of data, of population data studies, or ad hoc brainstorming sessions. Advanced methods such as design thinking, prototyping, or setting up digital transformation teams are still the exemption. Also, it came out that most new ideas still come from civil servants talking to civil servants. So the participation of business or citizens in the whole process of new ideas and innovation is fewer than 10%. By contrast, with 68% say that they get the new ideas from government employees. It also appears that governments that adopt the largest variety of co-creating methods, such as design thinking, data analysis, prototyping, show the most benefits. Many governments also have issued guidelines and toolkits for making co-creation happen, but there are very few metrics or compliance measuring processes by which the actual adoption rate can be assessed. Also, many EU member states invest in training on digital skills. However, training in co-creation methods is almost absent. Many EU member states also stated that they have hired workers with advanced digital skills and experience in working in new ways, but these teams do not really have a sufficiently important place within the administration to make a visible difference. And last, we can say that what have been seen is that municipalities have been slower than national governments to move and to move on this. Large municipalities like the Amsterdam or the Madrid case are leading, but overall the adoption in the co-creation field is low at the local level. Another data initiative that we ran in Co-VAL project was the co-creation dashboard that actually monitors and evaluates the progress and the adoption rates of digital transformation and co-creation across Europe in 5 areas: policy, interoperability and reuse, collaboration, skills, and monitoring. So I think it's interesting also to have a very short highlight of few key outcomes regarding this, and more information about this you will find on a report that will be shortly publicly available in the Co-VAL website. So the green light shows the high progress, the red light shows the low progress, the black light shows that data were not available. So overall, we can see that regarding policy, a strategic approach to digitalization with explicit consideration to the European interoperability framework has become mainstream across Europe, but the same cannot be seen or cannot be sent for the co-creation. Also regarding collaboration practices, it is seen that while co-creation may not be mainstream in national digital plans, every country has adopted some of co-creation practice.
Anna, can I ask you to sum it up and leave people to because otherwise we don't have time.
Okay, yes. Regarding the interoperability and reuse, it shows that countries have made an impressive progress on making base registries more widely available and developing nationally ID systems or other, let's say, key services such as e-payment available. However, only a small minority of countries can demonstrate high adoption of these services at the local level, while regarding the skills, only a small amount of countries and cities claims to have leveraged private sector knowledge and competencies by hiring managers with such experience. Last but crucial, I would say, is the monitoring that becomes a core challenge, since there is a lack of available data on important actions like across Europe, such as what are the formal requirements for co-creation, the actual use of available APIs, and the service modules adoption by local authorities, or the uptake, let's say, of VID and the number of co-creation exercises and the number of digitally skilled public servants. So this is information that is missing. Few very high level, maybe I wouldn't say some lessons learned, but mainly focusing on things that we should not repeat as common mistakes in future. One of the things is, I mean, do not simply ask users, what do you need? I mean, this is one thing, and previously Lisa and David, but also the previous have mentioned things like that. We should not start with a blank page. Instead, we need to use a full set of methods in place in order to be able to extract the information that we want. Obviously, don't blame the users of not actually having a successful co-creation process. I mean, co-creation doesn't always work. This is true. And more frequently, the interaction is not inspiring and a little insight may be generated. But in these cases, what we have to do is to think when we organize our sessions that what it didn't work, why, and what can be changed in the future. And then just as a final remark, I'm not going to go through all, is don't ignore the cost. And this is something also mentioned from David. We have to respect the time and the effort of the participants in this process. So it is important to try to make the whole process clear and user-friendly. It is very important to make the co-creation process itself user-centric. So all this information about Co-VAL results and the recent reports and policy briefs can be found in our website. And of course, I would like to, last but not least, to make a big reference to the consortium partners that have worked for the outcome.
Thank you very much. And sorry to interrupt you, but
No
since
problem.
we are partners, since you are partners, I felt I could.
Of course, no problem.
We are running a bit short of time, so we're still monitoring the chat. Feel free to intervene. In particular, if you have implemented co-creation methods, we want to hear from you. What's your feeling? What do you think? Does this ring a bell? Do you think this is just some academic theory? To what extent does your experience match our analysis? Now, final intervention, Keith. Last but not least, of course, we have talked about practice, but research is still very important. To what extent have we found all the answer? To what extent do we need more research? And if so, on what should we focus?
Thank you, David. Good afternoon from a very sunny afternoon in Newcastle upon Tyne, northeast England. Two quick things, no slides and 3 minutes. Time's wearing on. So as a researcher, my answer to the first question, funnily enough, is yes, we need more research. So that will come as a great surprise to you all. And secondly, I want to suggest the areas of research we might want to develop further. So I think the common conclusion across the 5 projects is that a number of questions on co-creation have yet to be addressed in order for it to be effectively deployed across services or scaled up. I think our knowledge is very project-based, often at a local level, and to actually transform public service through co-creation, we do need more questions posed. We do need more answers examined. But as I say, as a researcher, I would say that, wouldn't I? To give you some suggestions, on page 17 of the briefing paper, we've got 19 or 20 possible areas where we need more information. Now, clearly, I'm not going to go through those. I'm just going to highlight 2 or 3 examples. And what we've done is we think we need to know more about, firstly, organizational settings. Secondly, co-creation's relationship with digital technologies. And thirdly, we need to know more about the actual impact of co-creation. In my own work on the COGOV project, I find quite a few people thinking co-creation is a good idea. And you think, well, why is that? Well, it's a good idea in itself. That's not really a helpful response. It's got to be an impact. There's got to be an improvement in people's lives and the services we deliver. So here we go. 2 minutes, some areas of research. Organizational design, we've got 3 examples where we need more work. Firstly, how can co-creation help us to build robust solutions in turbulent times? Now, I do need to mention COVID. Will the COVID pandemic make co-creation easier to implement? It's based on trust. Will people have more trust in government? Involving stakeholders more? Is there a real opportunity to develop a wider involvement of co-creation in health services? So again, is co-creation something we can turn to in turbulent times? Secondly, what are the underlying conditions, enablers, obstacles and drivers for co-creation of public innovation? We don't think we know enough about the link between innovation and co-creation. We need to know more. And thirdly, in my work, we find elected politicians aren't part of the game. Civil servants are, officers are, the public are. There's something quite uneven about the involvement of elected politicians in the co-creation process. We need to know more. What is it? Do they feel threatened? Is there some geographical or area-based political issues that cut across co-creation? Secondly, digitalization. 2 or 3 areas to look at further. Remember, co-creation needs digitalization. Co-creation isn't entirely dependent on digitalization. It's not the same. You can have an analog approach to co-creation, so we need to be careful, but it's a very close link. What digital technologies carry the most potential risks and benefits for co-creation in terms of AI, blockchain, Internet of Things, etc.? So what's the risks and benefits of certain approaches to technology for co-creation? What are the critical actions to be taken on public data governance so that public data can function as an enabler of co-creation and innovation? And how should ICT digitalization be handled? Centrally, decentralized? The British, where I'm speaking, the British government aren't particularly good at decentralizing, for example. And how can new technology and applications be implemented on a multi-level basis? Very finally, in my last minute, impact. 2 or 3 areas where, as I say, I'm not convinced we know enough about the impact of co-creation at scale. Firstly, what are the appropriate metrics for the use of co-creation and innovation in public services? What quantitative and qualitative indicators do we need to monitor their impacts? I'm not sure we have enough. Secondly, how can public authorities make co-creation more effective in terms of cost and reduce red tape? And finally, we haven't evaluated co-creation's impact very well. We've employed very top-down, rational, ad hoc approaches to evaluation, but actually we need a co-evaluation approach to co-creation where we involve ordinary people and citizens in the evaluation of their own services. And I think we need what's called a democratic approach to evaluation. It's a process, not an outcome. Finally, while promising practices are emerging in terms of co-creation, it's not achieved its full transformative impact yet. We need research to develop a mature approach to co-creation. And that's my 4 minutes, David.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for summarizing it so quickly. I hope you're all curious of understanding more about what we discuss here today, and obviously you can find this in the policy brief. We have some questions here, but I think they are more for everyone to actually answer rather than for us. There is an interesting example from Slovenia, a case of policy jams being adopted on economic diplomacy and system of long care, about monitoring and adoption of digital government, and a dilemma, a question by Rio, a dilemma arises in the direction of policy in developing countries. So to what extent is co-creation and digital part of the process or an outcome? And I fully sympathize with this in the sense that we have to be very clear. We are at the stage where co-creation too often it's a goal. It's basically the goal, while we need to arrive at a stage where co-creation is just an instrument. This is our goal. I mean, all of us, we are passionate about this. We are advocate of co-creation. But we do not, our goal is not to have everyone passionate about it. Our goal is to make it a very basic instrument that is useful to deliver public services better to the users, to make it normal in other ways, and make it unsexy, make it boring. That is our wish and our what we are working of. Let me see if we have more question. Maybe someone wants to answer this question from Diane, who observes that, by the way, a lot of these barriers are not new, they were there already. Is there a periodic pattern in co-creation, or a way to link it to the background context and special circumstances? Is this just a trend that we are facing now? It's inflation and it will go away soon. I don't know if some of the speakers want to address this in 1 minute, because we don't have more time.
David, I could very quickly say to Diane that it's a good question. I mean, 2 very quick views. One issue that we've got to really get to is co-creation only works in certain circumstances at certain times. So that's a really good point. My view is it tends to work better for existing services than it does for new services, sorry, than it does for existing services, for example. And also in the UK, where it's linked to austerity, i.e. it may be a better approach to use in periods of economic growth, because in austerity, often organizations use it as a way of legitimating cuts in public services by transferring responsibility down to citizens rather than as a means to actually promote citizens' rights, etc. So I think we've got to be much more discerning. And my own view is it's not, in terms of the cycle, it's an approach that shouldn't lend itself to a period of austerity rather than a period of economic growth and expansion.
Great. Anyone else wants to add something on this? The politics of co-creation will be the title of our next research project. We have an interesting observation by SAP that is implementing design thinking for more than 10 years. So how can we, an interesting question, how can we incorporate the practices of co-creation in public services? How can we incorporate it? How can we teach? How can we spread? Can we teach co-creation? Maybe, what's your experience? Or do we just need to hire them?
I try to answer very briefly, but I think that the both is are relevant. There is the need of professionals to manage, also to act as an independent medium among different interests, but also it must be a language that is shared and also an habit to cooperation. That was I referred to as institutional sustainability, to understand it, the two paths together and to understand how to speak a common language, I think. Excellent. So I think it can be learned and taught.
I think this is a good ending for the session. I'm a bit cautious with time. We are now switching to the next session, and I really don't want to go over time. So, Paul, can I start to bring you in and give you the baton?
Hello, am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'd be delighted to start, but we're about 1 minute early here.
Do you want to comment on the discussion we had?
Well, I've enjoyed it tremendously, but I hope the participants have as well.
Absolutely.
David, there's still some quite good questions coming in. Have we got a minute or not?
Yes, go ahead.
We've got about 40 seconds, yeah.
Right, very quickly, Lorenzo, how to select citizens that are suitable for co-creation. Stephen Osborne, colleague, friend, he refers to co-experience, which is the everyday experience of ordinary lives. That's what we want. We don't actually need university graduates or trained planners. We need people with their own experiences. So I quite like the term co-experience that we're tapping rather than, specific professional knowledge.
Absolutely, and we removed it for practical purposes, but it was the fourth layer. So co-construction, co-design, co-production, and the fourth layer, the basis of all was co-experience, but it became a bit difficult to explain.
It's your fault then.
Paul, it's exactly four.
Okay.
The floor
yes, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of co-experience, welcome. I'd like to welcome everyone to the second part of this session, which is, of course, devoted to the theme, Government in the Service of Citizens, a European Blueprint. We have some very distinguished speakers whom I'll introduce in a moment, but first let me introduce myself. I'm Paul Hofheinz, and I'm the president and co-founder of the Lisbon Council, and we're, of course, a partner in Co-VAL. You've heard a lot about that already, and we're among the organizations performing the research that's been presented to you here today. Look, this next session is an embarrassment of riches, and you haven't come here to hear me speak, so let me move directly to introducing our speakers. We have Commissioner Johannes Hahn. who I don't know how many of you have been snooping around the participant list, but Commissioner Hahn has been with us for quite some time. So we're delighted you found time to listen to these presentations today, sir. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say a bit later. Commissioner Hahn, for those of you who don't know, is the European Commissioner for Budget and Administration since 2019. It's his third mandate. Prior to that, he was Commissioner for Neighborhood Policy and Enlargement Negotiations, and prior to that for Regional Policy. He was also, as many of you know, he was the Minister for Science and Research in the Austrian government back in the day. That's when the Lisbon Council first got to know him. He was, of course, an outstanding minister who had a real presence here in Brussels from his perspective of a national government then. He's also a bit less known, has a background in industry and a PhD in philosophy from the University of Vienna. Sandy Speicher is with us today as well. Sandy, we welcome you to the call. I know you had to get up very early to hear these presentations. Sandy, for those of you who don't know her, is CEO of IDEO, the global design and innovation firm. IDEO, of course, works with clients in the Americas, Asia, and Europe across healthcare, education, financial services, the food system, and many other industries and sectors. Sandy's an internationally recognized expert in designing large-scale systems as a practicing designer and as an educator. She's been widely cited in publications ranging from the New York Times, Quartz, the Wall Street Journal, and even has taught a course at Stanford D School. And if you don't know what Stanford D School is, it's not the same as Stanford B School. Stanford D School is a place, and I quote from their website, for explorers and experimenters that helps people develop their creative abilities. She's also taught at Washington University of St. Louis, Reading Elementary School, and she serves on the board of IDEO.org, which is a nonprofit dedicated to eliminating poverty in the US, Africa, and to creating a more just and inclusive world. And finally, of course, we have Minister Kyriakos Pierrakakis. Minister Pierrakakis is the Minister for Digital Government in the cabinet of Kyriakos Mitsotakis, a very good friend of the Lisbon Council, who, by the way, last time he spoke at the Lisbon Council was the Minister for Public Administrative Reform. Mr. Pierrakakis has a master's in public policy from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, as well as a master's in science and technology from MIT, the Massachusetts Institution of Technology, as well as bachelor degree in computer science from Athens University of Economics and Business. He's also a fellow think tanker. We love welcoming think tankers to these discussions. He was director of research at Geonosis, an independent think tank, where he personally produced an array of research papers with a strong focus on economic growth, as well as the perceptions and beliefs of Greek citizens. He's been an outstanding minister and an inspiration to many on this call. Commissioner Hahn, if you don't mind, we'll go to you first, and I have 3 questions that I would like to put to you. What are the upcoming plans and priorities for the European Commission in this area? What's the role of co-creation, design thinking, and the things we've been discussing here already in delivering better results for citizens? And last, but by far not least important, how can a community like this, a group like ours, help? Thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
So, thank you very much, colleagues, and thank you for the invitation. And Paul, thank you for this kind introduction. And by the way, I consider myself also as a member of a think tank, because I used to say the Commission is the only think tank in the world with an executive power. So, having said all this, by starting answering your question, I think we used to say that every cloud has a silver lining. And in that sense, even Corona also has a positive side effect, despite, of course, all the downsides we know. We gained a new momentum to speed up digitalization in Europe and in our public services. We were forced to do that. So, for instance, within days, the Commission switched to teleworking for more than 30,000 people, and this is only the beginning. I want the European Commission itself to be a digital frontrunner, using its full potential to engage with Europeans. The future has already started. Nevertheless, digitalization is not only a matter of being fast, but also of doing
it the European way. That means citizens and future-oriented, interoperable, open, secure, and innovative, or in other words, based on our European values and principles. European digitalization has to ensure freedom, participation, and services for all, unlike others who use technology to reduce freedoms and human rights. Today, I would like to focus on the implementation of the Tallinn and Berlin declarations and to highlight how digitalization, in particular in the public sector, serves citizens and businesses. This is the fundamental to make Europe stronger. And of course, I would like to use this opportunity to praise the research you are presenting today. With its direct link to the user-focused Tallinn Declaration and the value-based Berlin Declaration, it will support our work on future interoperability and digital government policies, firmly based on co-creation and partnership. Digitalization is a political priority for this Commission, simply for the fact that there will be no single market without digital in the future. The pandemic worked in that respect as a catalyst. Digitalization is now the key to recovery and resilience. It will help citizens and businesses to navigate the crisis and thus plays an important role, not only in the long-term budget, but also in the special recovery instrument, Next Generation EU. At its core is the so-called Recovery and Resilience Facility with 672.5 billion euro in loans and grants. And here we are talking about 2018 prices. So in reality, it's already a little bit more. This amount will ensure that member states' recovery plan includes a minimum level of 20% to foster digital transition. And I can tell you, we are looking in the draft proposals of member states, and I would say in most of them, this threshold of 20% we are far beyond this 20%. Member states understand the need to invest in digital transition. But in addition to that, the Commission will support the sector with funding, not only by instruments such as Digital Euro Program and the Connecting Europe Facility, but also via other programs, including Horizon, which is the Research and Innovation Program, or Creative Europe. Of course, all joint EU investments in high-performance computing, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, digital skills, and electronic IDs are highly relevant for the public sector use as they are building the Union's common digital infrastructure. Speeding up digitalization requires speeding up digitalization of public administration. Digital public services will accelerate standard procedures and thus free resources for individual help to support citizens and businesses. According to a McKinsey study, this is also a matter of trust. Residents who are satisfied with the public service are nine times more likely to have confidence in the government. I hope this is motivation enough, but maybe not all governments are aware about this study yet. In a single market where people work, live, and do business beyond borders, we need public services serving this idea. Free movement becomes reality when you can get your Portuguese birth certificate in your Brussels commune, or when you expand your business with a few clicks from Italy to Poland. Citizens will feel they live in a common single market when a once-only system empowers us to better organize our lives and businesses everywhere in Europe. This is clearly the commitment of member states in the Tallinn and Berlin declarations. Digitalization saves time and, of course, money. It promotes a European lifestyle based on trust, openness, and respect of the individual. Working together to find better solutions is a part of the European Union's DNA. That is why interoperability is the core of Europe's digitalization. In my direct area of responsibility, we are working hard on a reinforced interoperability strategy for early 2022. Interoperability is the necessary backbone of a cooperative European data ecosystem. It goes beyond the public sector. It's more than just technical details. It includes the capacities of entities to trust each other, know each other's mandates, and describe data in a commonly agreed fashion. The green transition is a good example why interoperable systems are essential. We can only find smarter transport solutions if we combine the information flow from different areas. That means interlinking mobility data with energy and environmental data to facilitate daily life applications. Interoperability serves the citizens and businesses best if we do it the European way. Of course, there are already different technical solutions on the market promising interoperability, but we need to be prudent. Could we trust all these systems to be secure? And can we be sure they are open and thus adaptable to the specific needs on regional and local levels? Therefore, Europe stands for open source systems, which set common standards and leave room for specific needs. Interoperability allows living up to common values while serving local needs. This is European subsidiarity at its best, united in diversity. Developing open source and interoperable systems ensure a European independence, but at the same time, they are the opposite of a fortress Europe. They are an offer to the world. The career of the European data protection rules prove how well this works. We already have adequacy agreements with several other like-minded countries such as Canada, Japan, and New Zealand. European standards became global, creating security and trust. Building on our values strengthens not only our strategic autonomy, but also our international rule. A stronger Europe also builds on a public sector, creating an environment of innovation. More than ever before in pre-digital times, it's important to reach out to the private sector. In close cooperation with innovative businesses, often local SMEs and European startups, public administration can experiment with trustful use of new technologies such as blockchain and artificial intelligence. This so-called GovTech setup requires a change of traditional public sector approaches and more use of innovative procurement tools. I believe a strengthened European interoperability strategy can set the necessary framework for a collaborative EU GovTech ecosystem to emerge. We will also promote the European approach of finding better solutions together with our new GovTech incubator. Let me give you an example. If we need a European tool for citizens' participation, it's best to join forces and to find cross-border and cross-domain ideas. That is why we did the platform use for the debate on the future of Europe. And already today, the respective commissioner in charge reported about first contributions to the debate using this platform and also their analytical capacity, if I may say so. Another example, adapted a tool initially developed by civil society in Barcelona. The aim is to serve citizens and companies better by improve user-centric services as well as more security and transparency in public services. All of this will offer great opportunities for startups and SMEs in a growing GovTech market and thereby strengthen Europe's competitiveness. European digitalization is a question of trust in European values and in the principal idea that digitalization serves the people and not vice versa. Therefore, the European Public Digital Service requires a culture of cooperation. This will help us to accelerate the transformation, to use investment smartly, and to find better solutions together. This event is another good example of joining forces. We need to co-create at the European level to safeguard and speed up local transformation, to serve citizens and companies, to inspire ideas, to attract investments, to cooperate with neighbors and partners all around the world. So I'm looking forward to building this stronger Europe together with you. It's necessary to have many, many allies and people pushing and stimulate this transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. If you don't mind, I'd like to abuse the microphone briefly just to ask you two questions right away before we go to Sandy Speicher. First, I'm interested in the role that co-creation plays in your life. The European Commission is, of course, part of a very large ecosystem. You have the Council and the Parliament to deal with, to come to a decision on anything, and quite a few departments within the Commission, too. I think you've headed 3 of them yourself. I think it's no secret that not everyone gets along all the time. I'm just wondering what role co-creation might play in driving change and reform and public administration within the European Commission and within the European institutions. And if you don't mind, a second question, and I apologize, but you'll have to be brief in your answers too. You mentioned the interoperability strategy coming in 2022. We're very interested in that, as are many people. I'm just wondering, what incentives do you foresee for member states to go along with it? What's the win for member states in showing greater dedication to this policy going forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the 2 questions. First, on co-creation, I think one of the most important things is to overcome silo mentalities. And that's why it is so crucial to have this principle in place, but not only as a principle, but also to apply it and to live up to it. I think in the meantime, we have made some progress, but a lot has to be done. And I think the last year has given us a lot of push on this, but it has also shown that working on new solutions, on new tools, etc., also means that people sitting together around the table. You can also see some limitations if you only use, so to say, the remote opportunities. I think it's another proof that we need both elements of the 2 different worlds. And this brings me to the second, interoperability. I think member states, regions, etc., would benefit a lot if we could save time and money if certain procedures, certain processes are simply accelerated in the way that we are not forced to send, so to say, letters and I don't know what, and have a physical exchange, but really use the opportunities. And I think also the last year has given us a sense what are the potential of this. And this is why I have, together with the Portuguese presidency, which is currently chairing the union, organized, or we will organize an informal ministerial conference of ministers being in charge of public administration, really to work on this and to make a lot of improvements. But also this is only achievable if there are joint efforts and if everybody is committed to it. And then, of course, I think Europe can benefit a lot. And if this spirit of interoperability is then also translated in a kind of interoperability between private business sector and public administration and vice versa, it gives another, so to say, push and another opportunity. And here we can really lead, for example, also beyond Europe.
Okay, thank you. Sandy, Speicher, you know, at the Lisbon Council, we used to give awards out for frequent flyer miles, the person who'd come the furthest to be with us. But of course, in the era of WebEx and Zoom, you can address us right there from your house or your office. What I'm saying is Sandy's coming to us from California. Good morning, Sandy. I know it's very early there, and we're delighted you could get up early to be with us today. Sandy's, of course, an expert on not just design thinking, but all of the things that are happening worldwide, the many institutions and people who are using design thinking to address societal challenges and other things. I believe you have a presentation for us. We look forward to seeing that, and in particular to hearing what you have to say about the crucial question here, which is how can we use all of this comment and theory and research to deliver real benefits to European citizens and to everyone around the world. Sandy, the floor is yours, and thank you again for being with us.
All right, thank you, Paul, and thank you for the invitation to be here today with you all. I'm going to hold you to that award for the most traveled, because in the world of digitization, we still have to uphold some old traditions. So,
yes.
Well, I'm sorry to not be with you all in person, but I'm glad we could still figure out a way to be together. So as Paul mentioned, I'm the CEO of IDEO. And for those of you that don't know IDEO, we basically spend our days immersed in these kind of co-creation processes that you're discussing here today. And I'm here to share some stories about design thinking and how it is inherently an approach to co-creation that is being used to make progress on social challenges. I want to say I love the way that David opened the event earlier today with the question, how might we serve our citizens better? I think there cannot be a more noble question to be asking. So I'm so pleased to hear that you're holding it. And your definition in the policy brief that you launched is really excellent. I love the point that fundamentally services and experiences can be better designed by listening, by imagining, by prototyping and learning and iterating, and most importantly, engaging people in the process as both users and designers. And this is where digitization isn't just about the technology, it's about our practices, about how we connect with each other, how we use the benefits of scale and accessibility and adaptability. So for many people, the words design and design thinking might conjure up certain images. Maybe it's colorful Post-it notes stuck on an office wall, or a framework that you might have learned in a brief workshop, or even thinking about the next version of a product that you hold in your hand. But of course, it's so much bigger than that. The challenges that we're facing today as a society are urging us to use a designer's mindset, which is things like curiosity and empathy and optimism, along with a designer's skill set, a depth of craft, creativity, and design methodology, to develop solutions that work for the many, not just the few. And that belief is essential when you're working at the scale of government, because you exist in service of everyone's well-being. We've already started talking about this, but the global pandemic that we're all experiencing has really shown us that our foundational systems, the institutions that are meant to bind us together, are starting to fail us. And whether it's on purpose or not, it is all by design, because our systems were built by people, by us, and they were not built with the needs of all people in mind. And that's why we need to get really good at these co-creation methods that you're pointing to become better designers, better collaborators, and better builders of our societal systems to better serve our citizens. So today I thought I would share two stories of how design thinking has been used to co-create systems. And I hope that you'll see how they respect and value people and their wisdom in order to get to new outcomes. There are stories that IDEO has been a part of over multiple years where we've gone really deep in designing with people across communities with diverse needs. And I'm going to share some slides because I'm a visual person, and they're just images. So don't worry that the information isn't on the slides. Let me just get the screen share going. Share. Great. Can you all see systems?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so first, I'm going to take it out to Los Angeles County here in the US. Los Angeles County is the largest voting jurisdiction in the US. They have about 5 million voters. And for decades, the experience of voting was super frustrating to people. The ballot itself was confusing and hard to read. The time for voting was really constrained because, because people work, because people have lives, and to be able to only vote in one particular day caused a lot of constraints for people in a way that it just caused them to choose to not vote. And the officials in LA County wanted to create a system that would make it easier and more engaging for people to vote, and that would be adaptable so that they could evolve over time as people's needs change. There we go. And so, of course, as many of you know, people have a wide range of needs when it comes to voting. Some voters are vision or hearing impaired, or they arrive at the precinct in wheelchairs. Others have disabilities or are unfamiliar with technology. And people are of all ages and all backgrounds and speak many different languages. And as designers, we need to understand all of these needs. But it's not just about the voters' needs. There are also many different players in the ecosystem of voting, and they all have needs too, whether that's poll workers or volunteers or county commissioners. So as a result of all of this input, in partnership with multiple organizations, a new set of solutions were created, some of which needed to be manufactured and some of which needed policy change. And I'll just give you a few examples here. There's a touchscreen device that allows voters to adjust the angle of the screen, and also allows them to choose from the many languages spoken across the county for their ballot, which wasn't the same case when they had the printed ballots. If you're vision impaired, you can use a tactile keypad or have a ballot narrated through your headphones. This photo on the right is one of my favorites. It's Stevie Wonder. I don't know, do you all know Stevie Wonder? I can't really see you, but I see some people nodding and thumbs up. So Stevie Wonder, who is a vision impaired performer, he was engaged in giving feedback on the voting system. So here's him using an early prototype. And as part of the design of this system, sorry, I love that photo so much, I got distracted. Okay, so as part of the design of the system, also, it wasn't just about the device, it's about the way that the system can engage with people. In the process, we decided to expand the number of voting centers from a few to hundreds to make it easier for people to access. And anyone registered in the county can vote at any of these centers rather than only the one most close to them. There's also an extended voting period as part of this design, which is not the norm in America, so that we could accommodate different people's needs. I would take the whole hour if I shared with you all of the ways that people were engaged in this process. But I want to say they really come down to engaging with people to know their experiences, hear their ideas, and get feedback on what the experience can be like. And participatory democracy only really works if every voter not only feels like they're part of the system, but is treated as such. And LA debuted this system last year. So I'm going to point to some of the outcomes here. And it's quite hard to single out what factors might have driven this outcome. But LA County saw a 28% increase in votership as they launched this system. They had 4.3 million people voting compared to 3.3 million in 2008. So we will continue to learn about the system. LA County will continue to learn about this system and iterate upon it. And the best part is that it's owned by the county. It's something that they have created, and they now have ongoing processes to iterate on this experience. All right, I'm going to cruise you around the world now over to Peru. And we're going to move from voting to education. So I don't know how many of you might have been to Peru or seen schools in Peru, but historically, Peru has had one of the lowest performing school systems in the world. They still are in a rote learning pedagogical experience. There are quite naive teachers. There's a lack of educational standards, and a lot of the infrastructure is crumbling. One of the most prominent leaders in the country, Carlos Rodriguez Pastor, wondered how he could help change the system. He was already a successful business leader developing services for the emerging middle class, and he decided that he could do something for his country by creating a school system that would be both international quality and affordable for the emerging middle class. So because that answer isn't already there, it needed to go through a design process. And in that process, it began, of course, as we're talking about today, in engaging so many people around considering the future of learning, parents and teachers and children especially. Everyone also is a stakeholder in education, so we had to collaborate with government officials, business leaders, and thought leaders from around the world. And we asked them to all design with us. What makes learning valuable? How might we support teachers to learn and grow? How might we inspire and evaluate students in a way that feels validating and engaging? How might we design a system that can also learn and grow over time? And the result is Innova Schools. It's a system that's been designed from the ground up. And since it launched, Innova has opened more than 60 schools in Peru. It's now the nation's largest private school network, and it currently serves more than 50,000 students. And I know when you hear private school, maybe you're thinking that it's expensive. But the goal of the system was to create an affordable system that Peru's emerging middle class could access. I think it might cost around $2,000 per month to educate a European student. And here at Innova, the cost to families is only $150 per month. And not just that, students are testing at levels 2 to 3 times the national average in math and communications. And the World Economic Forum identified Innova as one of 3 benchmark school systems in the world. Innova has already expanded to Mexico and is becoming an education model for Latin America. But the best part is that they're constantly iterating on the design of the schools and the curriculum. Their system has a central innovation team that routinely works with teachers, parents, and students to understand their needs, incorporate and scale best practices, and also look ahead to how to design schools in the future. They've made schools themselves a learning system. All right, I'm going to go off of screen share. Just conclude here. So I hope that these examples bring to life the idea that design thinking is a rigorous approach that can get us to the kind of outcomes we seek, especially when done with dedication and with the engagement of people at the core of the process. Design has taken on so many new forms these days, from designing services and experiences that are fit for our digital era in ways that are more inclusive, helping to transform organizations to center on purpose, better care for their employees, routinely innovate, and build more agile ways of working. And also design is being used to help evolve systems through radical collaboration across individuals and organizations. With all of these complex questions as part of our remit, it is really clear that designers have an immense responsibility to care for people through the process of design. People are relying on us and what we create to support them in ways that shape their lives. And more than ever, we need to be conscious of evolving our work processes to be more inclusive, more embedded in community, and more participatory. I'm so happy that you all are here for this conversation, and I really look forward to seeing what happens in Europe over the coming years.
Okay, thank you for that, Sandy. If you don't mind, because we're running a little bit late on time, I'm going to go straight to Minister Pierrakakis, but we will come back to you with some questions in a moment. Minister, we're delighted to have you with us, not just because it's an honor, which it would be any day of the week, but in particular because of your achievements in Greece around these dossiers that we've been discussing here. I know you'll be telling us a little bit about that in your remarks, so I'll stop there and pass the floor to you and say, ordinarily you'd have gotten the frequent flyer award, but coming to us all the way from Athens, but I think Sandy has irked you out a little bit this time. Minister, the floor is yours. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. And let me begin by saying how delighted I am to be with you, and that the Lisbon Council is doing a tremendous job vis-a-vis bringing together politicians with leading experts in technology and technology policy. And this is something which is much necessary, especially, I would say, these times. Now, having said this, I have to say I'm also delighted because of the topic of the discussion, because creating services together, service design, is actually at the nucleus of what we have been trying to achieve in Greece in the last 1 year and a half, since I was at July 2019, where we created this new organization that I'm leading, the Ministry of Digital Governance, which we have been internally saying that we should have called it the Ministry of Service Design. And this is why I was very happy to hear Sandy's remarks before, because in reality, we understood, I think, quite early on that service design and the proper co-creation of services in order to better serve citizens and corporations is actually our KPI, what we should have been trying to achieve overall. To this regard, prior to the last election, as you mentioned, Paul, I was a think tanker. Prior to the last election, we established a new plan for digital policy, a new organization, actually, which took new capacities with regards to interoperability. And the KPI was to diminish administrative burdens in Greece. In reality, help citizens be better served by the state, have the Greek state act as an enabler and as a mechanism of empowerment and not as an impediment, which is what it was perceived up until recently. Having said this, the core of our policy and what we have been attempting to do is better codified by a platform that we were originally inspired by the UK example, in that case, gov.uk. We understood that creating a similar platform, a bit more service-driven in our case, gov.gr, would be much closer to our needs, and it would be an enabler as well with regards to having citizens being served by a single point of reference. We created gov.gr last year during the first lockdown, the beginning of the pandemic. We started by 501 digital services. What we did on day one was simply aggregating all the pre-existing digital services of the Greek state that worked. It might seem as something very easy to do or very simple, but on day one, we were actually receiving congratulations for services that citizens didn't even know about. So this was effectively a service design approach, have a single portal where the state serves citizens, and then we started adding services. According to what principle? A very simple principle, the Pareto rule. That 20% of one thing can be 80% of another thing. So there are certain services which are most frequently used by citizens, the power of attorney, for instance, driver's licenses, e-prescriptions. So within a year, from March 2020 to April 2021, we have more than doubled the services offered at the government portal, and now we have more than 1,100 plus services currently being offered. And I want to connect this with what Commissioner Hahn said before, that in reality, this is a question about values, because what we understood, I think, during the first lockdown is actually very much connected to an op-ed written by Yuval Harari in the FT last March 2020, where what he effectively said was that after a couple of years, the pandemic will be over, but what will remain are your technological choices as states. So the choices that we made had at their core a very simple word, the word empowerment. We took an already existing strategy that we had since 2019, simplify services, better serve citizens, have service design at the core of the offering, and we instrumentalized this policy as a tool to battle the virus, because we understood, I think, quite early, that as we're simplifying services, as we're digitizing, as we're serving citizens and corporations digitally, we're also helping to battle the virus, ensuring state continuity from home. And the numbers showcase that this worked quite well. All the digital interactions that citizens had, either directly or indirectly, with the Greek state, if you compare 2018 to 2020, we had a leap of 11 times up, from 8.8 million interactions to 94 million interactions. And this is what we have been trying to do as well with our vaccination platform. The vaccination platform that we have in Greece was designed from a service design perspective. We wanted it to be digital A to Z. and we wanted to create channels that would be very easy for citizens to access. So in reality, very briefly, we had two digital channels rather than one. The obvious channel was to create a digital platform similar to the one that airline companies, for instance, have, where you book your 2 appointments for the vaccine. So that was, I would say, the easy part of the equation in accordance with the population groups that the vaccination committee decided upon. The second channel, the second digital channel, was instrumentalizing the e-prescription platform that we launched a year back, where citizens had actually entered their data with regards to their address and their age and some basic information. So what we said actually was that we pitched to citizens that if you're enrolled in the e-prescription system and you have given us your data so that we know your address or your age, we will come to you and we will offer you the appointments for the vaccine. You don't have to do anything else. All you need to do is confirm it or not. And if you don't want to confirm it, then you can go to the other channels that we have developed, the platform being the other digital channel, or some physical channels. Now, in the physical channels as well, there was a service design approach. I think it was a wise decision not to use call centers. We have seen that all over the world, call centers haven't worked at all vis-a-vis vaccine appointments, because I think it was self-evident that, especially as we started from the older population groups, having call centers receive as many calls as possible on day one wouldn't have been feasible for them to serve citizens. But we knew that we needed to develop physical channels for those who are not digitally skilled, or for those who don't have some people to help them. So what we did there was that we have 11,000 pharmacy stores in Greece, quite many actually. They have an SME structure. So, and those pharmacy stores already have access to the prescription system. So we instrumentalized the pharmacy stores as physical places where citizens can book their appointments. And we added another 1,000 citizen service centers, which we already have in Greece, for a second physical, let's say, layer for appointment booking. If you add all 4 together, this is all service design. Even though it's the digital ministry together with the Ministry of Health designing it, in reality, we tried to design a system which was fully digital, also with regards to the vaccine centers as well, where everybody has a tablet, where everybody has a QR code as they go there. Thus, it was quite easy for us to go ahead and propose an extension to this system, and I'm referring to the vaccination certificate, because as we had a system which was fully digital to begin with, the vaccination certificate was very easy for us to be offered as a proposition to be issued by the system, and we didn't really need too much time to adapt. Now, this vaccination platform overall has proven to be successful, and it has also proven to be successful on a second front, and the second front being showcasing citizens what we're hoping to do overall using digital technologies in the Greek state. So we're digitizing, we're offering up services through our government platform. Identity is a huge issue as well. We have procured identity cards similar to the Estonian paradigm, but we're very much in accordance with the EIDAS directive, and we're trying to create a wallet of identities using the identity platforms of the banking system, using the identity platform of our tax system, and offering up access to services at different layers. And I'm saying this because, as Commissioner Hahn said before, interoperability is not only a discussion for the public sector, it's a discussion about the private sector as well. And I think it's interesting for us to hear this, because next week we're launching a new service, a Know Your Customer service for the Greek banks, which is effectively our first service where we're interoperating with the banking system in Greece, because the banks themselves have bureaucratic processes asking citizens to visit their guichets, to offer tax information, etc. So again, this will be happening in Greece by next week through our interoperability platform, through the government portal. And we're starting from the banks. We will continue with the telecom operators. We will continue with energy companies. And we fully understand that this discussion, always in accordance with the GDPR, is a discussion that we need to move forward as quickly as possible. And on a final note, the RRF, given that in Greece we have developed a very concrete strategy, which we call the Digital Bible, which is not only a strategy, it's an implementation plan. We have codified 448 specific projects, small or large, that we plan to implement within the next 4 years. The RRF is a unique opportunity for us. It's a Marshall Plan for our age. in order to implement 100% of this strategy and fully complete this leapfrogging attempt that we have been trying to do for this last 1.5 years. Having said this, again, thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm very much eager to hear your thoughts and questions.
Minister, thank you. And let me first of all address the participants who are on this call who haven't had a chance to speak yet. We're going to turn to questions in a moment, so please start putting them in the chat room. Technology permitting, I won't just read them out. We will call on you to ask them. So be ready to stand by to switch on your camera and switch off your mute. In the meantime, I'm going to use the platform again and ask the minister a question. Minister, first of all, no one's ever come to a Lisbon Council session and described themselves as the Minister of Service Design before. But I think that's really quite fantastic, and that makes you an honorary member of the Lisbon Council for all time. I hope that every government will have a Minister of Service Design going forward. It's a great idea. My question was going back to the Commissioner's remarks about the interoperability strategy that will be relaunched next year. How, in your view, in particular, given your experience in Greece, can we take all of this experience to scale? How can we get real interoperability in Europe, co-creation going elsewhere? What does it take to go from local to national to European? I think you're muted.
Good. So in reality, I don't think that there is a unique size-fits-all approach that one can adopt. I think, unfortunately, everybody has to be a little bit ad hoc here because everybody has to implement their own gap analysis with regards to what's necessary. For instance, in our case, we needed to do a series of legislative reforms on day one and organizational reforms. The key reform in the Greek case, I have to say, was empowering this office, the Office of the Minister of Digital Governance, with the capability to interoperate every database that exists in Greece, also, of course, on the basis of the GDPR. This didn't exist before, and exactly because everybody had to sign off this interoperability between the various datasets, interoperability never happened to the extent that it should, because everybody has a silo mentality, as mentioned before. So in reality, we created a new layer of capability within our government where interoperability can happen if there is a green light from this ministry. And we have the technical scale to do this through our interoperability center. We have a General Secretariat of Information Systems. Our cloud policy is implemented there. Our interoperability policy is implemented there. So in effect, we centralized policy for interoperability directly under the Prime Minister's office. Why did we decide to do this directly under the Prime Minister's office? Because governments have been traditionally good at vertical policy and traditionally not good at horizontal policy. In order to implement horizontal policy, you need to showcase that the horizontal project is effectively the project of the head of state or head of government. This is the case here, and I guess this is part of the answer why we have managed to move ahead at speed.
Terrific, thank you. I see also a question from Elke Vinnekers from the city of Rotterdam. Chris, if you could unmute Elke, and Elke, if you'd like to ask your question directly to Sandy Speicher, it would be our very great honor and pleasure.
Yeah, that would be very nice. Thank you. So my question was kind of that I'm working as a designer at the city of Rotterdam, and well, you were talking about the responsibility designers have for the future world we're creating, and I'm sort of wondering whether that, like, all of that responsibility should lie in the hands of the designer, and I'm wondering how we can make, like, others responsible for the process and the result as well.
It's such a good question, and I do think that that's what this whole conversation about co-design starts to bring us to, where before we might have thought that as designers of the system, we're doing that for people. And design now is evolving to really understand that it's not just about designing for, it's also about designing with, and in some cases designing by, where as designers, we actually don't solve the problem, but we engage others to solve for themselves. And I think that a lot of the work is really figuring out what question needs what methodology, and who owns what in the decisions, and how can we help where people own decision space. So sometimes, for instance, in our work in education that I mentioned in Peru, there's a lot to design in to help the teachers own how certain parts of the system evolve, to create feedback loops where parents can engage in giving feedback into that system, where kids can actually engage in that. And sometimes that means creating representative councils. Sometimes it means actually helping others build design capabilities themselves. And this is where I think that like the methods of design now get to mature so much and deepen and expand, but also us as designers get to use a lot of different ways of orienting and find the right place to be enabling others to take that ownership.
Okay, thank you. I see a question also here. I can't tell if this is from, I think it's from Michael Burnett. Would you like to unmute and ask your question directly to Minister Pierrakakis?
Oh, can you repeat the Michael Burnett is
Who is the last one
from,
you just, okay, well, you put it
he's
in my chat
joining
here.
us from
Is that
the-
Beatriz, so is that Beatriz Belmonte? It's unclear who's asking this question. Awesome experience from Greece. What has been the impact internally with civil servants? Who asked that? Can you unmute them, please, Krista?
These are
Yes,
coming from
Beatriz
the
Belmonte
digital
is-
platform.
Okay.
Yes, she's not here. She's not able to ask the question. We have to read it out.
Well, I'll ask it then. Okay. The question is, awesome experience from Greece. What has been the impact internally within civil servants teams? And has there been any significant change in their way of working beyond remote working and such? I do believe that's for Minister Pierrakakis.
I have to say that in reality, this question is altered by the fact that since last year, we have been also experiencing a pandemic. So in this regard, what the pandemic did is that it acted as a digital accelerator, meaning that what was outstanding, what was perceived as necessary, became absolutely necessary during the pandemic. So in this regard, what we have been doing is that we're ensuring state continuity. Thus, the civil service has endorsed the changes. To make a very quick analogy, actually a very quick example of what we have been trying to do and how the public service is also helping, let me use the following case. The birth of a child. The bureaucracy behind the birth of a child up until last March 2020 involved 5 bureaucratic steps, visiting 5 different public services in Greece. The hospital, the citizen service center to get a social security number, the registrar's office, the municipality, and the pension fund of the father or of the mother to enroll the child. This is the very definition of bureaucracy. So in reality, what we did was that we used the Interoperability Center, and now everything is happening at the hospital. And the parents receive an SMS with the social security number, and a second SMS that tells them whether or not they will be receiving a state stipend. Now, in order to do this, we had to change laws, we had to create systems, and public servants needed, in a sense, to have a new role. Because previously they had to interact with citizens directly, now they had to interact with systems, or even not. They had to be, have new responsibilities within their respective public services. I think that everybody quite understands that this is necessary to do, that it's necessary to implement this leap. And in reality, we're not seeing resistance. We're seeing actually a will for change. And I think that this is quite optimistic, but also realistic statement.
Okay, thank you. And I think a moment ago, I saw Commissioner Hahn taking copious notes on Minister Pierrakakis' intervention, in particular what he had to say about interoperability. Would you like to respond to some of those comments, Commissioner? And is there anything else you would like to come back on that's been said in this session?
Maybe more on a, let's say, political note. You were asking me in your first question about the effects of interoperability. And I think one we should not underestimate this. Interoperability contributes to much more transparency. Actions, procedures are more traceable. And this is also extremely important when it comes to be more accountable to our citizens. So I think there are so many effects, and the minister was also talking now about, so to say, potential savings, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of time for citizens, if things can be done, so to say, in a more one-off setting. But I wanted to stress this element of transparency linked to interoperability, which I consider as a very crucial one and gives more also reassurance to our citizens.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question from my colleague, David Osimo, about the slow government processes and the immediate needs of citizens. David, would you like to ask the question directly of the minister?
Well, that's an honor. Thank you very much. I didn't expect this. Well, it's just that you mentioned the need for urgent action, and you mentioned so many new services being set up, but at the same time, we are used to the slowness of government processing, setting up, in launching new services, in procurement. And so how did you balance the two needs? How did you overcome, how did you manage to face this new challenge and deliver service in such a short time?
I think he's muted.
I think they're doing that there. Krista, did you get him? Is he on? Minister, I think you're on now.
Now I'm on.
Send a request.
I think this was the $1 million question before we began. Why? We fully understood that the procurement timeframes can be problematic, right? Especially when you're trying to procure. I think this is actually a structural risk overall. Why? Because technology has a different time scale, right? It ages more quickly than traditional infrastructure, and procurement rules have been designed, I would say, for the investment priorities of a previous era. But the good thing about IT is that on certain aspects, some systems are large, that you can't avoid. If your state is trying to obtain an ERP system or a CRM system or something from scratch, then you have to procure traditionally. But if you're trying to develop a small platform, or if you're trying to do what was said before, interoperate between two systems, those things are small projects. And small projects can be actually procured quite fast, or on certain things, not many, you can do your own capacity building within the state. So in a sense, we tried to do everything together. We tried to procure the large systems, and we have been trying to do this as much as we can. We tried to develop certain platforms given our own capabilities and the people and the talent that we managed to bring internally, but also taking advantage of the good people that we already have within our existing structures. And we procured small systems, agile systems, as quickly as possible. And in those 1,100 services that I mentioned, you will find small extensions of pre-existing systems or connections and interoperabilities between others. And you will see humongous value in that. The best example that I can share is the fact that Greece had an e-prescription system since 2013. But the e-prescription system only had an interaction with doctors. So in reality, the citizen never had access to that system. What we did was a simple extension to a pre-existing system. We added a layer where you could give us your mobile phone or your email and your address, and then whenever the doctor prescribed, you received the prescription on your mobile phone. And guess what? This was instrumental during lockdown. And it was extremely instrumental during vaccinations. And it was a small project, which was a simple extension of a pre-existing system. So in a sense, it's like squeezing an apple. It's like squeezing everything that you already have in order to get the maximum out of it. And this is, I think, what we have managed to attain so far.
Okay, thank you. I know that the commissioner has to go to another meeting in a moment, so we're going to come to our last round of questions. And Commissioner, I'll go to you first. I'm going to ask the same question of all three of our very distinguished speakers, with Commissioner Hahn first. In the previous session, Keith Shaw from Northumbria University said that we need more research in this area. So my question to you is basically this. What will you take away from this very interesting and rich discussion today? And what are those questions that, in your view, are still on the table? What could we do in the future that could advance this debate and continue to bring greater understanding, not just for researchers, but how we can deliver these better services we're talking about? Commissioner Hahn, I will let you go first, and thank you for being with us. I know you have a hard stop at 5, which I think we just hit, but maybe you could say a few words before you leave.
Thank you very much. What we didn't raise today, but which really linked to all this, is the issue of artificial intelligence. And just today, we adopted in the college a communication about a future kind of regulation, how to deal with artificial intelligence. And many of this will certainly affect also public administration, but it's also an area where a lot of research can and should be done, but which will definitely change our not only way of working, but also the qualification of our civil servants. It will relieve many people from routine work, but there's also a need to upgrade skills or to have a requalification of people. So I think there are a lot of potentials. For instance, if I take, you mentioned the different services which are under my control. One of them is General Directorate for Translation. These are the ones who translate written texts last year we had I think more than 3 million pages to translate. This was an increase of 20%. Also, we had over the years a decrease of around 20% of people, but this was only achievable due to the necessary programs in place. And may I say, we have a translation program in place, which is, according experts, equally excellent, at least like the Google translation system. And there will be a lot of further developments. And I have tasked my people to reach out to colleagues first within the Commission, but later on, of course, other EU institutions and then public administrations in member states to see what can be, so to say, future developments in this area. Because if I take, for instance, the current multi-annual financial framework, which came just into force at the beginning of this year, we managed to have an increase in all budget lines with one exception, and this was public administration and salaries. Also, we have almost doubled the budget. So that means we have to see how we can optimize the way we are working, and this is only possible if we look into sort of say potentials and savings, and this can only be achieved by implementing more artificial intelligence and having more so to say tools available in order really to keep this level of performance we had in the past and ideally even improve it. But thanks again for this inspiring hour together with all of you and listening in particular to the colleagues.
Thank you, Commissioner. I hope we can co-create some great policies together with you in the coming years as well. Sandy, if I could put the same question to you. What will you take from this discussion? And what questions do you think we've left on the table for the next round?
Thanks, Paul. There are two things that come to mind that I'm taking from this session and very inspired by. I think the first is really that we must hold the concerns of now at the same time as we're creating the future. And I've really felt that from the minister in Greece, that there's brave action required in order to do this. And it's a careful balance because there's never enough time to be as deep as we want as designers, and there is too big a risk if we don't evolve our practices. And then the other thing is really getting to what I felt in the heart of Elke's question about responsibility, that there is immense presence and engagement required to really be designing with people. And that is something we all have to learn how to do and how to balance and how to integrate in our lives. And it's different than sitting in an office at a distance. So those are things that I feel I'm really taking away from the conversation. In terms of questions on the table, again, two things come to mind, and I did see there was a question in the chat about experimentation, and that is a thing we didn't discuss, and it's really true that in order to get somewhere new, we have to be able to try things. And so I do think that you all in government really need to be thinking about how to create the conditions to try things in a way that's safe for people. And that is a whole realm of research and design and policy that's going to be needed. And then maybe just to end, I would offer that the word I didn't hear enough today, I think, is creativity, and how creativity fits into these co-design processes. It's not just about now and people speaking their needs and thinking about reacting to now. It's about how we take leaps to create a better society. And so how do we accept creativity as part of some of our bureaucracies? What does that mean to really take a leap? And that feels an important part of this. Otherwise, we end up maybe perhaps co-creating for co-creation itself rather than to get to radically new outcomes.
Wow, well, thank you for that. I wish we had another hour just to explore all of the ideas that you introduced in your concluding remarks there. Minister Pierrakakis, what will you take from this discussion, and what questions would you like to leave for further reflection?
What I certainly take from this discussion is that interoperability with the private sector is a European priority, and it's an area where we need to focus even more, I would say, in the coming months, apart from the initial actions in our case that I mentioned before. What's still on the table, I think, and what we need to explore further is how AI can play a role in service design, how this service design equation can become more systematic, even though it has creativity at its core. And creativity, by definition, is a subjective, has a subjective nature. Thus, we need to see how we can make this more systematic, how we can ingrain this culture even in our algorithms. And it's one of the areas where we much need to focus on.
Okay, thank you so much. Listen, we've gone over time. I have to say, another Lisbon Council tradition, my favorite thing to hear about an event is when you ask people, how was it? And they say, it was too short. I actually love hearing that, because how many meetings have you been to that you thought were too short? But that said, we were trying to squeeze an entire world of experience into 2 very short hours here today. And I think in that sense, rather than wrapping up a project, which is part of what this event was for, this was only a beginning. So thank you all, both for the knowledge and experience and commitment that you brought to this discussion, but also for leaving us with so much more to think about and do in the coming years. In that sense, very briefly, I'll just thank my team, thank the partners from Co-VAL, thank our excellent speakers, and thank all of you for joining as well. And maybe I'll close with Sandy's very inspiring words, that what we really need to do is hold the concerns of now as we are co-creating the future. I can't think of a better note to end on, and thanks again to everyone for coming.
Thank you.